Hey everyone, Larry Finney with Greene, Finney, Cauley here to continue our series on fraud. Today I want to talk about detecting fraud. So I want to mention right up front what I consider to be the most important takeaway. That is that the more effective your internal controls, processes, and procedures are, the more effective your fraud awareness training is, and the more fraud prevention tools that you utilize, the more successful you are going to be, not only in preventing fraud, but also detecting fraud. So most of what I want to talk about today is either coming from our own experience in working on fraud cases at Greene, Finney, Cauley, but also the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners 2024 report to the nations that I've mentioned in earlier videos. So when it comes to detecting fraud, it can be easy and it can be hard. Some of that depends upon the creativity and sophistication of the fraudster or fraudsters, and some of it depends upon you and your team. By far and away, the most common way that fraud is detected is through tips. More than half the time, those tips come from employees. About a third of the time, they come from vendors and customers, and about 15% of the time, the tips are simply anonymous. In addition, the ACFE study showed that employees are about twice as likely to provide a tip if they have been through fraud awareness training as opposed to if they have not. The study also showed that tips most commonly are either web-based or email in terms of how they are provided, and the telephone is a distant third. So that brings three things to my mind that we need to think about. One is because fraud is most commonly detected and provided information on from employees, doesn't it make you want to make sure that you're doing a good job of regularly providing fraud awareness training, not just to staff, but to management and even to board members? The ACFE study showed that training staff, management, board members on fraud awareness can not only cut your losses in half, but can also significantly reduce the duration of the fraud. In specifically looking at nonprofit cases, the study showed that the duration of fraud can be cut 2.5 times through providing fraud awareness training to your staff. The second thing that comes to mind is that since almost a third of the tips come from customers and vendors, doesn't it make sense that you'd like to have some conversation with them as well about the possibility of fraud, both to help you in the business you do with them, but also in helping them understand that it's important inside their organization as well. And then thirdly, most of the mechanisms right now that organizations use to provide anonymity is through a telephone hotline. But since most of the tips are provided through either an email or a web-based product, doesn't it make sense that we would like to provide anonymous ways to provide tips electronically as well? It's also interesting to note how effective tips are in detecting fraud, even though only about 14% of organizations provide some kind of reward for whistleblowers. To me, that just shows how often we as people just look at something that is going on illegally and just don't like it, whether it impacts our organization or the fact that we're seeing somebody acting illegally for their own benefit. The last thing I want to mention is that while there are many different fraud prevention tools available, what I think is most important is for you to evaluate all the options and determine based on the data what tools would really be most effective for your organization. It's easy to provide a good comprehensive list online, but what's important to me is to ensure that your organization is actively using these tools, actively letting your people know that you're using these tools, and then actively providing fraud awareness training to everybody in your organization, not just once, but regularly. And I think you will be very glad that you did.